The bell rang, echoing through the classroom as Amara's essay, "Why My History Matters," fluttered to the floor. A red F glared from the top of the page. Mr. Dalton's polished shoe pressed down, grinding the paper into the tile. Amara's fingers curled into fists beneath her desk, her breath coming in shallow bursts. Around her, backpacks brushed past as classmates hurried out, eyes averted. One girl paused, looked at Amara, then quickly turned away, saying nothing. The trophy case near the door caught the afternoon light. Silver faces of past valedictorians, staring out, all white, all smiling. Amara's warped reflection flickered in the glass, her essay trampled at her feet. "Lock up, Amara. And tone it down next time," Mr. Dalton called over his shoulder, keys jangling as he left. The hallway camera blinked, its red light steady. Amara knelt, smoothing the creased paper. A photo slipped from her notebook, her grandmother at Selma, holding a sign that read, "Tell the Truth." She tucked the photo into her pocket, the sharp folds of her essay pressing against her thumb. The classroom emptied, shadows stretching across the desks. Somewhere, a janitor's radio played a low, mournful tune. Amara stood, her resolve hardening. She pinned the essay back on the bulletin board, the red F, facing outward for all to see. Let them try to erase it again. The camera's light blinked once more as she walked out, wind tugging at her hoodie. In the hallway, a phone camera snapped a photo, capturing the moment the truth refused to be hidden. Before the story continues, please let us know from where you are watching this video. Write your city or country in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit like if you believe in stories that challenge injustice. Your engagement gives power to voices that need to be heard. Amara stopped in the hallway next morning, her heart thumping as she spotted her essay pinned to the bulletin board. Black marker slashed across the page, the words "Stay in your lane" scrawled over her title. Her name was scribbled out, replaced by question marks. Students clustered nearby, whispering, some snapping pictures with their phones, others glancing away, pretending not to notice. Amara's breath caught as she saw her own reflection in the trophy case beside the board, distorted, surrounded by the faces of honors students, none of whom looked like her. A teacher walked by, pausing just long enough to frown at the graffiti before moving on, her lips pressed tight. No one reached out. Amara stood frozen, the sting of humiliation burning in her chest. The hallway camera blinked overhead, recording everything, but offering no help. A group of boys laughed as they passed, nudging each other, one of them muttering, "Guess she learned her lesson." Amara's fingers twitched at her side, wanting to tear the essay down, but she stopped herself. She forced her shoulders back, chin lifted, refusing to let them see her break. A friend walked by, offered a small, helpless shrug, then hurried away. The bell rang, lockers slamming like distant thunder. She turned away from the board, the echo of the marker's message ringing in her ears as she walked down the hallway. Her shoes squeaked on the linoleum, each step a quiet act of resistance. The essay remained, defaced but not erased, a silent scream for anyone willing to look beyond the surface. Amara kept moving, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders, but her resolve growing stronger with every stride. The air in Principal Whitlock's office was stale, heavy with the scent of old coffee and polished wood. Amara sat across from his desk, her hands clenched in her lap. Whitlock's veteran educator plaque gleamed behind him, a silent boast. He slid a letter across the desk, his gold cufflinks catching the light, tiny Confederate flags, bold and unapologetic. Amara's gaze fixed on them, her jaw tightening. Whitlock cleared his throat, voice flat. "This is for you. Disruptive rhetoric has consequences." He didn't look up, his pen tapping a slow, steady beat on a stack of untouched documents. Amara's mind flashed back to stories her father told, same office, same chair, same accusation. She remembered his words. They called it attitude. I called it the truth. She unfolded the letter, reading the word suspension, stamped in bold. Her chest tightened. but she refused to let her voice shake. "You're suspending me for writing about my own history?" Whitlock's eyes flickered, a hint of discomfort quickly masked. "We expect students to stay on topic, not stir things up." The clock on the wall ticked, each second stretching the tension. Outside, Amara's mother's car pulled into the lot, unseen by anyone in the office. The secretary peeked in, hesitated, then closed the door quietly. Her face unreadable, Amara stood, letter in hand, her chair scraping against the floor. "You can try to stop me from speaking, but you can't stop the truth from spreading." She walked out, her back straight, the letter trembling only slightly in her grip. Whitlock watched her go, his fingers drumming an uneven rhythm. The office felt colder, the power he'd wielded for years suddenly fragile, threatened by a single act of courage. The car door closed with a dull thud. Lena gripped the steering wheel, knuckles pale, the suspension letter crumpled in her lap. Amara slid into the passenger seat, eyes fixed on her phone. Tick-tock notifications flashed across the screen clips of her essay, the defaced board, and classmates' comments. Lena's lips pressed together, a tremor running through her jaw as she fought to keep her voice steady. Neither spoke at first. The engine hummed, the air thick with things unsaid. Lena's mind raced back to her own high school days' detentions for talking back, warnings for attitude. She glanced at Amara and saw the same quiet storm in her daughter's eyes. The traffic light turned green, but Lena didn't move. Amara finally broke the quiet. "They posted it everywhere, Mom. Everyone saw." Her voice was small, almost apologetic. Lena exhaled, shaky. "They want you to feel alone, baby, but you're not." Her words were soft but fierce, a promise wrapped in pain. A car honked behind them. Lena jerked forward, pulling out of the lot. The ride home was tense, Lena's grip never loosening. She parked abruptly outside their house, hands trembling as she shut off the ignition. She turned to Amara, voice barely above a whisper. "We're not letting this go, not this time." The words broke a dam, years of quiet endurance slipping away. Amara nodded, her own resolve hardening. Lena reached over, squeezing her daughter's hand, the letter still balled in her fist. For the first time, Lena allowed herself to feel the anger, the grief, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, things could change. They sat together in the parked car, the world outside moving on, but inside, something had shifted, a vow. Silent, but unbreakable, Amara scrolled through her phone, thumb trembling as her essay's photo flooded Instagram. The caption, "Yishinwa history hurts," glowed beneath hundreds of comments. "This happened to me too," one read. Another, "Speak louder." Her notifications buzzed nonstop, classmates reposting the image, some in solidarity, others with mocking emojis. Amara's breath caught as she watched the numbers climb. A video surfaced next. Whitlock laughing with a teacher, the words "too loud" echoing in the background. The clip looped, silent but damning, as students watched in the cafeteria, their faces tight with anger or fear. Amara's friend sent her a message. "You're trending. They can't ignore it now." At home, Amara's grandmother pinned a black and white photo beside her bed, a younger version of herself at a protest, holding a sign that read, "We fight because we must." The badge on her coat looked just like the one Amara now held in her palm. "You see this?" her grandma said quietly from the doorway. "The fight never left us. It just changed shape." Amara looked at the screen again, her own face reflected in the glass. The hashtags multiplied, spreading like wildfire. She felt exposed, but not alone. Each new comment, each repost, was a spark small, but together, enough to light a blaze. Her mother peeked in, worry and pride mingling in her eyes. "You started something, honey. Don't let them put it out." Amara nodded, determination settling in her chest. The world outside was watching now, and the story was no longer just hers. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been told to stay quiet, and for the first time, The shadows felt less suffocating, lit by the glow of 1,000 voices. Rising together, the school's hallway buzzed with a new kind of energy. Amara's phone vibrated in her pocket, the screen lighting up with a TikTok notification. She hesitated, then watched the clip a shaky video zooming in on her defaced essay, the slur still fresh and ugly. The caption read, "Suspended for truth." Within hours, views climbed into the thousands. Students huddled in corners, watching, sharing, whispering. Whitlock's secretary printed out a stack of comments for him, her hands trembling just enough for the pages to slip. "This school's racist," one note read, scrawled in angry handwriting. Whitlock took the pile, jaw tight, and fed each sheet into the shredder, the machine chewing up every accusation, every plea, every truth. The shredded paper fell into a bin labeled "Parent Concerns," the irony lost on no one but him. In the cafeteria, a group of students watched the TikTok on repeat, their faces a mix of shock, amusement, and something like hope. A teacher passed by, pausing for a moment before moving on, her brow furrowed. Amara caught a glimpse of herself. On someone's phone, her story now public property. Jake, a quiet sophomore, nudged his friend. "She's not the only one. They've done it before." His friend nodded, eyes scanning the comments. "Maybe this time, someone will listen." Amara stood by her locker, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes, but also the strange support of those who finally saw her. The video kept looping, the slur impossible to ignore, the truth impossible to bury. The school's walls, once silent, now echoed with the sound of exposure, each view, each share, another crack in the armor of denial. Amara sat in the library, her fingers tracing the faded spine of an old yearbook. She flipped through the pages, stopping at a black-and-white photo of Mr. Green, the school's former janitor. His eyes were tired, his smile thin. Tucked between the pages, she found a yellowed memo dated 1998. A formal request to remove Confederate flags from football games. The principal's reply was scribbled in red ink. "Tradition matters." A librarian noticed Amara's interest and paused beside her, adjusting her glasses. "He left after that year," she murmured, voice low. "Said he was tired of fighting walls that never moved." Amara snapped a photo of the memo, sending it to her friend Jake. Seconds later, her phone buzzed, a message from Mr. Green's grandson. "Grandpa quit after this. They broke him." The words landed heavy, a reminder that this wasn't just her battle. In the hallway, a custodian emptied a trash can, glancing at Amara's way. He offered a quick nod, eyes flickering to the yearbook in her hands. She nodded back, feeling the weight of history pressing down. The intercom crackled overhead, announcing the start of class. Amara tucked the memo into her notebook. The paper, brittle, edges worn. She stood, the librarian giving her a small, knowing smile. "Some stories get buried," she said quietly, "but they don't disappear." As Amara walked out, the janitor's photo stared up at her from the open yearbook. She closed it gently, promising herself she wouldn't let this story fade. The echoes of forgotten complaints lingered in the air, a silent reminder that every act of erasure left a mark, and every mark could still be uncovered. Amara lingered near the counselor's office, her gaze catching a stack of discarded papers in the recycling bin. A faded transfer form peeked out, edges curled and stained. She pulled it free, reading the name, Maria Lopez, age 15. In shaky handwriting, Maria had written, "Mrs. Dalton called me illegal." The word "resolved" was stamped over the statement, the ink bleeding through a faint water stain. A counselor entered, pausing when she saw Amara. She offered a polite but distant smile, then busied herself with a stack of folders, her coffee mug reading, "All are welcome here." The phrase felt hollow in the quiet room. Amara texted a friend, asking, "Do you remember Maria?" The reply came quick. "She moved schools. I don't talk much now." Amara's chest tightened. She looked at the transfer form again, the official stamp doing little to hide the pain underneath. A group of students passed by the office, their laughter muffled. One girl glanced at Amara, then at the form in her hand, her expression flickering with recognition before she hurried away. The counselor glanced up, hesitated, then turned her chair, avoiding Amara's eyes. Amara folded the paper, slipping it into her notebook. She felt the weight of Maria's story settle beside her own. The hallway outside buzzed with activity, but inside, the truth sat quietly, waiting for someone to speak it aloud. As Amara left, she caught her reflection in the glass door. For a moment she saw not just herself, but every student who'd been marked, dismissed, or quietly sent away. She pressed her palm to the door, a silent promise that Maria's story wouldn't vanish in a file marked Resolved. Ms. Carter met Amara at the edge of the faculty parking lot, her steps slow but steady. She handed over a leather-bound journal, its cover worn smooth by years of anxious hands. "I kept notes," she said quietly, voice rough with memory. "For the ones who never got to speak." Amara opened the journal, flipping through entries written in careful script. One page, dated 2003, read, "Student punished for essay on slavery called Angry." Another, "Told to teach both sides of segregation. Refused." The ink had bled where tears once fell, the paper brittle at the edges. Miss Carter watched. Amara read, her fingers twisting a silver ring. "They told me to forget. I never could." She looked away, eyes shining. "You remind me of the kids who kept trying, even when it hurt." Amara traced a line with her finger. "Why did you—" "Stay," Miss Carter's lips pressed together. "I thought if I left, no one would remember. I hoped someone would find this." A car door slammed nearby, startling them both. Amara closed the journal, holding it close. "I won't let them erase this," she said, voice trembling but sure. "Miss." Carter nodded, a small, sad smile flickering. "That's all I ever wanted." As Amara walked away, the journal heavy in her arms, she felt the weight of every story inside. The scent of old chalk clung to her hands, a reminder of lessons unfinished. She glanced back at Miss Carter, standing alone in the fading light, and knew the wounds in those pages were still fresh. But now, at last, they had a witness. The cafeteria was dim, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Amara's friend slid her phone across the table. The screen paused on a grainy security footage clip. Whitlock and a teacher stood near the staff room, heads close together, lips twitching in suppressed laughter. The timestamp blinked, the day of Amara's suspension. The teacher's lanyard swung as he chuckled, the words, "woke kids," barely audible but sharp enough to sting. Whitlock's eyes darted, a tight smile barely masking his nerves. The camera caught a quick exchange. A nod, a furtive glance saying more than words ever could. Students clustered in the cafeteria, phones raised, watching the video loop again and again. Faces hardened, some shaking their heads, others whispering in disbelief. A girl's voice broke the hush. "They think this is a joke." Amara stared down at her hands, knuckles white. The footage pressed on her chest, a silent confirmation of what she'd always suspected but could never prove. Laughter behind closed doors was now public, undeniable. A janitor passed by, pausing to look at the screen. His eyes flickered with a mix of sorrow and quiet pride. He muttered just loud enough, "Finally, they see." The lunch bell rang, but the usual noise was gone, replaced by a heavy, unspoken tension. Whitlock's office door loomed in the background, no longer just a doorway, but a symbol of power beginning to fracture. Amara's friend leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "This changes everything." The camera's red light blinked steadily, recording the moment when the quiet broke and truth began to echo through the halls. The cafeteria, once filled with routine, now held something new, an uneasy hope that the walls might finally listen. Amara sat on her bed, the glow of her phone lighting up the dark room. A new Instagram post from Hidden Narratives flashed across her feed. The first screenshot showed a parent's email. "Keep that black girl quiet. The next, "Don't let her be valedictorian." Amara's breath caught. Each message was more brazen than the last. Her grandmother knocked softly, stepping in with a folded blanket. She glanced at the screen, eyes narrowing as she recognized a sender's name. "That one," she murmured, voice tight. "Sat on the board when your father was here." Amara's fingers trembled as she scrolled. The account's bio reading, "We see you." The words felt like both a warning and a promise. Down the hall, Amara's mother paced, phone pressed to her ear. "No, I saw it too," she whispered. "They're finally showing what we've always known." In the next room, her brother watched the follower count rise, his face a mix of anger and awe. At school, Whitlock's blinds snapped shut. The secretary peeked through the glass, her hand hovering over a stack of printed emails. She hesitated, then slid them into a drawer, her lips pressed in a thin, anxious line. Amara pressed her phone to her chest, the weight of exposure settling in. The messages were out now, impossible to take back. She glanced at her grandmother, who squeezed her shoulder gently. They hid it for years, not anymore. Outside, the wind rattled the window pane, carrying the sound of distant voices. Amara knew the darkness wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with truth, screenshots, and the first flickers of real change. Amara sat at the kitchen table, her phone buzzing with new messages. Her grandmother entered quietly, a small box in her hands. She opened it, revealing a tarnished protest pin, its edges worn smooth by decades of marches and meetings. "Your daddy got suspended for writing about Dr. King," she said, polishing an old detention slip with her thumb. "They said he was too bold. I said he was brave." Amara traced the pin's surface, feeling its cool weight in her palm. "Did you ever think about giving up?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. Her grandmother shook her head, eyes shining with memory. "I thought about it every day, but the world doesn't change if we sit quietly." She fastened the pin to her scarf, the clasp still bent from the night police tore it away. "Every time I wore this, I remembered who I was fighting for." A car passed outside, headlights sweeping across the kitchen walls. Amara looked at her grandmother, then at the slip of paper. "You kept this up all these years?" Her grandmother nodded, her grip gentle but firm. "We save what they try to erase. That's how we stay whole." Amara closed her hand around the pin, the metal biting into her skin. She felt the history in its weight, the defiance in its scratches. "I want to be brave too," she said, voice steadier now. Her grandmother smiled, a quiet pride in her eyes. "You already are." The kitchen filled with the hum of the refrigerator, the world outside moving on, but at the table, two generations sat together, bound by memory, by courage, and by the promise that the fight would never end with them. Jake lingered near the trophy case, eyes flicking to his phone as Whitlock approached, footsteps deliberate. The hallway had emptied, lockers closed, only the faint hum of the vending machine breaking the quiet. Whitlock stopped beside Jake, voice low, almost gentle. "Posting videos ruins futures, son. You want to be careful." Jake swallowed, his grip tightening on his phone. "It's just what happened," he replied, gaze fixed on the floor. Whitlock's breath carried a hint of mint, but underneath it, Jake caught the sharp edge of fear. "Some things are better left off the internet," Whitlock continued, his tone pressing, "especially if you want to graduate on time." Jake's thumb hovered over the record button, the screen already capturing every word. Whitlock shifted. Cufflinks glinting, Confederate flags, bold against his crisp shirt. He reached for the Diversity Champion trophy in the case, fingers tapping the glass. "People notice troublemakers, Jake. They remember." Jake raised his eyes, meeting Whitlock's stare. "People remember the truth, too." The principal's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. He leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "Know your place. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Jake stepped back, heart pounding. "I think everyone should see this," he said quietly. Whitlock's eyes widened, just for a moment, before his face smoothed into practiced calm. Jake pressed upload, the video flying into the world with no way to call it back. Down the hall, a teacher watched, her hand trembling as she clutched a folder. She turned away, guilt etched deep in her brow. The vending machine whirred, dropping a soda with a hollow clunk. Jake walked away, the phone warm in his palm, the weight of Whitlock's words already shifting into something else. Evidence. Amara sat across from the reporter in the nearly empty media center, the hum of old computers filling the space. The reporter slid a laptop forward, a spreadsheet open on the screen. "Take a look," she said, her voice steady but heavy. 30 years of suspensions. See the pattern? Amara leaned in, eyes scanning the red bars that spiked for black students, year after year. She traced the line with her finger, stopping at a peak her father's graduation year. "It's always us," she murmured. The reporter nodded, her pen tapping the table. "It's not just you, it's the system." She clicked to another tab, showing names, students, infractions, outcomes. 5 times more likely to be sent home. Same reasons, different faces. A board member's grandson, sitting nearby, glanced over, his jaw tight. "They suspended me for laughing too loud," he said quietly, not meeting Amara's eyes. The reporter made a note, her handwriting sharp and quick. Amara's chest tightened. "How do they get away with it?" The reporter's voice dropped to a whisper. "People look away. They call it discipline, not discrimination." Outside, the janitor paused at the door, watching the screen from a distance. He nodded once, a silent acknowledgement, then moved on, mop trailing behind him. Amara reached for her phone, snapping a photo of the chart. "People need to see this." The reporter smiled, tired but hopeful. "That's why I'm here." As Amara stood to leave, the spreadsheet's numbers burned in her mind. Decades of stories reduced to data, but now ready to be turned into something more. The computer's fan whirred, the screen still glowing, waiting for the next person to finally pay attention. The morning bell rang, but the usual chatter was gone. Amara entered her first period class, feeling the hush settle over the room. Her essay wasn't mentioned. The teacher glanced at her, then at the lesson plan, skipping over the assignment as if it had never existed. No one volunteered answers. Books opened, pages turned, but the air was thick with what wasn't said. A row behind her, a white boy doodled a clenched fist in the margin of his notebook. Across the aisle, a girl scrolled through her phone, eyes darting to Amara, then away. The teacher's hand shook as she wrote the date on the board, the chalk squeaking, breaking the quiet for just a second. At lunch, students traded Google Docs under the table, sharing banned articles and stories that weren't in the curriculum. A friend slid Amara a link whispering, "Read this later." She nodded, grateful for the small act of rebellion. The bell for next period was sharp, lockers slamming in rapid succession. Amara walked the hallway, her footsteps echoing. She passed the bulletin board where her essay had hung. It was empty. Now the pushpin still there, but the paper was gone. She paused, staring at the blank space. A teacher walked by, offering a quick, uneasy nod before hurrying off. Amara pressed her hand to the board, feeling the cool metal, the absence of her words. In the afternoon, the silence deepened. No one spoke out loud about what had happened, but every look, every averted gaze, every unfinished sentence said enough. The school felt different, as if everyone was waiting for someone else to break the quiet first. Amara kept moving, her resolve growing with every silent step. Amara watched from her bedroom window as her mother set up on the porch, cardboard spread, across the steps. The smell of spray paint drifted through the open screen. Lena's hands moved with purpose, stenciling bold letters. "Teach truth." Neighbors drifted over, some carrying markers, others just watching, unsure but curious. A retired janitor arrived, his grandson in tow. He handed Amara a faded marker. "Write what I couldn't," he said, voice rough with memory. Amara knelt beside her mother, adding her own words beneath the slogan. The porch lights glowed, casting long shadows. Across the lawn, more families joined, painting signs under the soft hum of streetlights. Someone brought hot chocolate, passing mugs around as the group grew. A teacher from school hesitated at the curb, then stepped forward, offering a stack of blank posters. "I want to help," she said quietly, eyes meeting Amara's for the first time. Across the street, the principal's house glowed yellow. His silhouette hovered behind the curtains, phone pressed to his ear. The crowd's voices rose, a gentle chorus of determination and fear. Lena looked at Amara, pride shining in her eyes. "We're not alone," she whispered. The signs multiplied, messages spreading from porch to porch. "History is ours. No more silence. We belong." The first protest sign was finished, bold and bright, ready for morning. Amara held it high, feeling the weight of every story behind it. As the night deepened, the neighborhood stood together, united by cardboard, paint, and the promise that this time the truth would not be quiet. Amara woke to the glow of her phone, notifications piling up faster than she could read. Can History Hurts was trending, her essay's photo now everywhere. Maria Lopez had posted, "I was Maria from the transfer form." The words hit hard. A story once erased now shouted back into the world. A teacher's anonymous account chimed in. "They made me fail black essays. I'm sorry." Amara's heart pounded as she scrolled through confessions, apologies, and messages of support. Each tag was a spark, lighting up the darkness that had settled over the school for years. Downstairs, her grandmother pinned the old protest badge to her shirt, her hands steady. "Our turn," she said, voice strong. Lena watched the news on TV, the school's front lawn already filled with reporters, students, and parents holding protest signs. Amara's brother filmed from the porch, catching the first rays of sunlight glinting off painted cardboard. Across town, Whitlock stared at his phone, color draining from his face as news vans lined the street. The principal's house, once a fortress, now looked small beneath the weight of public scrutiny. The school's inbox overflowed with emails, every subject line a demand for answers. Amara stepped outside, the morning air buzzing with energy. Neighbors waved, some offering hugs, others just nodding in solidarity. The porch was crowded, signs propped against the railing, coffee mugs warming cold hands. She looked at her phone one last time before joining the crowd. "This is bigger than me," she whispered. The hashtag kept climbing, a digital chorus refusing to be silenced. As the sun rose, Amara felt the tide had turned. The story belonged to everyone now, and the day ahead was theirs to claim. Title: Protest Pin and Power Suits, The Walk into the Storm. The courthouse steps gleamed in the early light, cameras flashing as Amara approached, flanked by her mother and grandmother. Her grandmother's protest pin glinted on her blazer, a silent promise carried through generations. Reporters called her name, microphones thrust forward, but Amara kept her eyes ahead, jaw set, hands steady at her sides. Lena adjusted her daughter's collar, whispering, "You're ready." Amara nodded, feeling the weight of every story. That brought her here. Her grandmother squeezed her shoulder, her grip strong, eyes fierce with pride and memory. Inside, the boardroom buzzed with tension. Whitlock watched from a window, straightening his tie, face pale. The board members sat in a row, nameplates polished, expressions unreadable. The air was thick with expectation, every glance loaded with questions unspoken. A security guard opened the door, his nod respectful. Amara's sneakers squeaked on the polished floor, each step echoing like a countdown. She caught her reflection in the glass, her grandmother's pin bright against the dark fabric. For a moment, she saw not just herself, but every student who'd ever been told to wait their turn. A board member cleared her throat, shuffling a stack of papers. Another tapped a pen, gaze flicking between Amara and Whitlock. The room quieted. As Amara took her seat, her mother and grandmother on either side, a wall of strength behind her. Outside, the crowd's chants filtered in, muffled but persistent. Amara's heart raced, but her voice was calm as she spoke her name for the record. The storm had arrived, but she was ready to stand in the center, anchored by history, family, and the truth that brought her here. A journalist wheeled in a projector, the whir of the fan filling the tense silence. She connected her laptop, and the boardroom wall lit up with a spreadsheet. 3 decades of discipline records, color-coded and impossible to ignore. Red bars spiked for black students, year after year, the pattern stark and damning. Whitlock's fingers drummed the table, his gaze fixed on the numbers. "It's about behavior, not race," he muttered, but his voice wavered. A board member's grandson stood quietly in the back, arms crossed, eyes locked on his own name in the data A suspension for loud laughter, the only black boy in his class. The journalist pointed at the peaks. Every time, same story, different names, same outcome. She clicked to a list of infractions, her tone measured. 5 times more likely, 30 years running. A teacher near the door slipped Amara a flash drive, her hand shaking. "You'll want this," she whispered. Amara nodded, tucking it into her pocket, her pulse quickening. A murmur rippled through the room. One board member cleared his throat, face flushed. Another scribbled notes, lips pressed thin. Whitlock's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Amara's mother leaned in, voice low. "They can't talk their way out of this." Her grandmother nodded, fingers tracing the protest pin. The journalist finished, unplugging her laptop. "The numbers don't lie," she said, gaze steady. "It's time to listen." The boardroom fell into a heavy pause, the spreadsheet's glow still bright on the wall. For the first time, the data spoke louder than any excuse. Amara gripped the flash drive, knowing the truth was finally in the open, and the tide was shifting in their favor. Amara slid the flash drive into the boardroom laptop, her hands steady, despite the pounding in her chest. The projector flickered, then filled the wall with a cascade of email subject lines bold, content raw. "Curb her influence." "Avoid Black History debates." Each message scrolled by. The senders' names, clear, the intent unmistakable. Whitlock's face was drained of color. He reached for the laptop, but a board member blocked him with a sharp shake of her head. The board president's signature appeared on one message, her eyes widening as she recognized her own words. She pressed her lips together, knuckles whitening, around her pen. A student in the back began live streaming, phone held high. "Watch him unravel," the caption read. The room buzzed with whispers, some shocked, some quietly triumphant. A teacher near the window covered her mouth, eyes brimming with tears. Amara stood her ground, voice quiet but unwavering. "You said I was disruptive. I was just telling the truth." She met Whitlock's gaze, refusing to look away. His cufflinks clinked as he clenched his fists, the tiny flag suddenly looking small. The emails kept coming. "Don't let her be valedictorian." Too much attention on her essay. The evidence was overwhelming, the room's power dynamic shifting with every line. A board member finally spoke, voice trembling. "We have to address this. Now." The president nodded, unable to meet Amara's eyes. Amara closed the laptop, the weight of the truth settling over everyone. For the first time, the boardroom felt different, less certain, less safe for those who'd hidden behind closed doors. The truth, once deleted, now echoed through the room, impossible to erase. Amara froze at the edge of the boardroom, the air thick with expectation. Her hands trembled, the echo of those emails still ringing in her ears. Her grandmother moved closer, pressing the protest pin into Amara's palm. The metal felt cool, grounding. "Tell them," her grandmother whispered, voice steady, eyes fierce. Amara looked around the room. The board president avoided her gaze, shuffling papers with restless fingers. Whitlock slumped in his chair, shoulders hunched, his veteran educator plaque reflecting the muted light. A teacher near the door offered a small, encouraging nod, her eyes shining with hope. Amara took a slow breath, the pin's sharp edge digging into her skin. She stepped forward, the microphone screeching as she adjusted it. The room stilled, every face turned toward her. Her mother squeezed her shoulder, silent support radiating in that simple touch. Whitlock's chair creaked as he shifted, trying to regain composure. A board member tapped her pen, the sound loud in the hush. Amara's voice shook at first, but she didn't let it falter. "You wanted me quiet. You wanted my story erased. But I am here. I am not alone." Her grandmother's hand rested on her back, steady and warm. "You're not," she whispered, just loud enough for Amara to hear. The boardroom seemed to shrink, the weight of history pressing in. Amara's words hung in the air, undeniable. The pin in her hand was more than a keepsake, it was a command to speak, to refuse to disappear. As she finished, the room remained silent, but something had shifted. The power that once belonged to the few now trembled, waiting for what would come next. Amara gripped the microphone, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She glanced at the board, at Whitlock's pale face, at her grandmother's steady hand resting on her shoulder. The room was silent, the clock on the wall ticking louder with every second. She took a breath, voice trembling but clear. "You suspended my essay, but my history doesn't need your permission." Her words landed heavy, the board members shifting in their seats. Whitlock's pen snapped in his hand, ink bleeding onto his notes. A board member's phone buzzed on the table donors pulling support, the news spreading fast. Amara's gaze swept the room. "You called it disruption. I call it truth. You tried to erase my story, but you can't erase all of us." She paused, letting the words settle, her eyes never leaving Whitlock's. He looked away, jaw clenched, hands shaking. A teacher in the back wiped away a tear, her breath catching. The live stream viewer count ticked upward, students and parents, watching from their phones, the moment growing beyond the room. Amara continued, her voice gaining strength. "Your silence can't suspend us anymore. We belong here. We always have." The clock's ticking grew louder, each second stretching the tension. Whitlock shifted in his seat, the power slipping from his grasp. Amara finished, lowering the microphone, her shoulders squared. The boardroom held its breath, the weight of her words pressing down. For a moment, no one moved. Then, quietly, a student in the back began to clap, the sound spreading until the room filled with applause. Amara met her grandmother's eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. The clock on the wall kept ticking, but everything else had changed. Whitlock's hand trembled as he reached for his water glass, the rim clinking against his teeth. He tried to steady himself, but the glass slipped, spilling water across the discipline chart. The ink bled, blurring the numbers that once justified his decisions. He dabbed at the mess with a napkin, jaw tight, eyes darting to the board members. A teacher near the door filmed discreetly, her phone angled just enough to capture Whitlock's shaking hands. The board president motioned to adjourn, her voice strained. "We need a recess." Outside, the sound of protesters chanting filtered in, their voices growing louder. "Vote them out! Vote them out!" Whitlock's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, color draining from his face. A message from his wife. "Lawyer says resign." He looked up, meeting Amara's eyes for the first time. She held his gaze, her expression calm, unyielding. A board member leaned over, whispering, "You can't fix this." Whitlock didn't answer. He wiped his forehead, sweat beading along his hairline. His cufflinks, once a point of pride, now looked gaudy and out of place. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in. The teacher in the back lowered her phone, her lips pressed together in a thin line of resolve. The board president gathered her papers, avoiding Whitlock's stare. Another member scribbled a note, hands unsteady. Whitlock stood, but his legs wobbled. He gripped the table, knuckling white, forcing himself upright. The chants outside grew louder, the boardroom's tension nearly unbearable. He looked around, searching for support, but found only averted eyes and closed ranks. In that moment, the authority he'd clung to for years slipped away, leaving only the echo of his own unraveling. The boardroom was thick with anticipation, every chair occupied, every eye fixed on the row of raised hands. The board president's voice was steady as she called for a vote. All in favor of an investigation? One by one, hands lifted 5, then 6, then 7. Whitlock's jaw tightened, his breath coming shallow. A student in the back unfurled a banner, the words bold: Amara's truth, Whitlock's lies. Cameras flashed, the moment captured from every angle. Whitlock gripped the edge of the table, knuckles paling as the final count was called. 5-4. 2. The vote was decided. He tried to speak, but his voice caught. The board president didn't look at him. Mr. Whitlock, you are hereby placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The words landed like a gavel, final and cold. A teacher exhaled, relief and disbelief mingling on her face. The janitor, standing by the door, held it open, his eyes meeting Whitlock's for the first time in years. Whitlock hesitated, then stumbled to his feet, the room spinning. He passed the janitor, who offered a brief nod, not of respect, but of acknowledgement that the balance had shifted. Outside, the crowd's cheers rose, shaking the windows. Amara watched as Whitlock exited, her expression unreadable. The board members shuffled their papers, some glancing at Amara, others at the floor. As the door closed behind him, Whitlock's breath came in ragged bursts. The authority he'd worn like armor was gone, stripped away by a single vote. The hallway felt endless, each step a reminder that the power he'd wielded so easily was now out of reach. Inside, the boardroom's tension eased, replaced by something new, the first fragile sense of justice. Amara stepped away from the table, the microphone left askew, feedback humming through the speakers. Her grandmother moved beside her, repinning the protest badge to Amara's jacket with steady hands. "They heard you," she whispered, pride and relief mingling in her voice. Amara nodded, her eyes glistening. Whitlock's chair spun slowly, empty now, the imprint of his presence fading. A board member pocketed the flash drive, her blouse stained with sweat, face drawn and pale. The teacher who had filmed the meeting pressed send, the video already spreading online. In the hallway, students gathered around their phones, watching. The moment justice finally echoed through the school. Outside, the crowd erupted in cheers, the sound swelling and spilling into the building. Amara's mother sent a quick text to her father. "She did it." He replied with a single heart emoji, the message simple but full. The boardroom emptied, members filing out with quiet steps, some offering Amara a nod, others unable to meet her gaze. The janitor lingered, his mop bucket reflecting the overhead lights, a small smile tugging at his lips. Amara stood for a moment, letting the noise and movement flow around her. She touched the badge at her collar, feeling the weight of history and hope. Her grandmother squeezed her hand, silent but strong. As the last board member left, the feedback from the microphone faded, replaced by the distant sound of celebration outside. Amara walked to the window, watching the crowd, her heart steady. The echo of her words lingered in the room, a quiet promise that justice, once spoken, could not be taken back. Whitlock's office was stripped bare, the walls showing pale outlines where plaques once hung. The janitor entered, whistling a soft tune as he tossed a Diversity Champion trophy into the trash. Dust floated in the morning light, settling on empty shelves. A stack of old files landed with a dull thud in a cardboard box. Students passed. By the open door, phones in hand, Amara's speech playing on repeat. Some paused, peering inside, curiosity and satisfaction mixing in their glances. The secretary gathered her belongings, her movements brisk, her face unreadable. She hesitated at the door, then left a note on the desk. "For the next one, listen." Whitlock stood in the parking lot, staring at his car. He fumbled with his keys, dropping them twice before finally unlocking the door. The engine sputtered, refusing to start. Frustrated, he slammed his fist against the steering wheel, the sound echoing in the empty lot. A student across the way caught the moment on video. uploading it within seconds. Inside, the janitor dusted the last shelf, pausing to look out the window at Whitlock, now pacing. He shook his head, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. The office, once a symbol of authority, now felt small and forgotten. Amara walked past, her reflection catching in the glass. She paused, taking in the emptiness, the discarded trophies, the note on the desk. She smiled just a little, then continued down the hall, her steps light. The school felt different, lighter, freer. The echoes of Whitlock's reign faded, replaced by the sound of students laughing, the promise of something new beginning to take root. Evening settled as neighbors gathered at the school's brick wall, buckets of paint and brushes in hand. Amara stood at the center, her father's old detention slip taped above her head. The first strokes were tentative, but soon bold colors swept across the bricks. Her essay's words, names of students silenced, and the outline of a protest pin. Retired teacher dipped her brush in red, adding, "They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds." Children traced handprints along the bottom, laughter mixing with the scrape of bristles. Lena painted beside Amara, their movements. In sync, each stroke a quiet act of defiance. A teacher from school arrived, sleeves rolled up, offering extra paint. "I want to help," she said, her voice soft but sure. Amara nodded, handing her a brush. Across the street, Whitlock's car idled, headlights off. He watched from a distance, unseen by most, his presence now powerless. The mural grew, a living testament to truth and resilience. Neighbors brought lanterns, illuminating the wall as darkness fell. Someone played music from a speaker, the melody hopeful and bright. Amara's brother filmed, capturing every detail for those who couldn't be there. When the mural was finished, Amara dipped her hand in red paint and pressed it beside her father's slip, sealing their stories together. The varnish shone under. The lanterns, every word and image refusing to fade. As the crowd stepped back to admire their work, Amara felt the weight of the past lift. The wall, once blank and cold, now blazed with memory and hope, a promise that their voices would never be painted over again. Whitlock entered his office one last time, the morning sun casting harsh lines across the empty room. His desk was bare, except for a single sheet of paper, his resignation, coffee-stained and signed with a shaky hand. He stared at it, the words "personal reasons" now a hollow shield against the truth. The janitor stepped in, carrying a roll of tape and a folded piece of paper. He didn't speak, just moved to the wall where Whitlock's veteran educator plaque once hung. With quiet purpose, he taped up a copy of Amara's mural blueprint, smoothing the edges with care. The clock on the wall ticked, each second louder in the stillness. Whitlock gathered a box of personal items, an old mug, a faded photograph, a stack of unused hall passes. He paused, glancing at the blueprint now hanging in place of his accolades. The janitor met his gaze, offering nothing but a nod, a simple acknowledgement that things had changed. Outside the office, footsteps echoed as staff and students moved. Through the halls, their laughter and conversation, a distant hum. Whitlock looked out the window, watching the flow of life he no longer controlled. He placed the resignation letter in the trash, the paper folding in on itself as it landed. The janitor lingered for a moment, then left, leaving the door open behind him. Whitlock stood alone, the empty office closing in. The clock kept ticking, but for the first time it was Whitlock who was out of time. Down the hall, the mural's colors glowed in the sunlight, a future built on truth, not titles. Whitlock picked up his box and walked out, the door swinging shut, with a final, quiet click. The library was quiet, sunlight streaming through tall windows. Amara's essay, creased but intact, hung in a new frame above the reference desk. The red F was still visible, but now circled in gold marker, a new grade written beneath, A+. Students gathered in small groups, pointing, whispering, some snapping photos to post online. A white classmate approached, phone in hand. She hesitated, then smiled. "Can I take a picture with it?" Amara nodded, watching as the girl posed, captioning her selfie, Learning from you. The librarian adjusted the frame, her hands gentle, careful not to smudge the glass. She wore a pin on her sweater. The words, "I voted for Whitlock," turned inward, hidden from view. A teacher paused nearby, reading the essay quietly. He nodded to Amara, respect in his eyes. "You changed something here," he said softly, before moving on. Amara lingered, tracing the outline of the frame with her finger. The essay's words, once dismissed, now stood as a testament to resilience. She glanced at the gold grade, a small smile tugging at her lips. Her grandmother entered, standing beside her, pride shining in her gaze. "Looks good up there," her grandmother said, voice warm. "It's not just mine anymore," Amara replied, her voice steady. Around them, students continued to read, to talk, to ask questions. The essay was no longer just a piece of paper. It was a story reclaimed, a lesson that couldn't be erased. As Amara left the library, the framed essay caught the light, casting a bright reflection across the floor. The truth, once crumpled and hidden, now belonged to everyone who walked those halls. Whitlock sat alone in a corner booth at the local diner, the morning rush swirling around him. His coffee sat untouched, steam curling into the air. Former colleagues entered, glanced his way, and chose other tables. The waitress, a black single mother he once suspended for missing work, set down a menu without meeting his eyes. He cleared his throat, trying to catch her attention. "Could I get a refill?" She nodded, her expression neutral, and walked away. Whitlock checked his phone, scrolling past news alerts about the mural and Amara's essay. Each headline felt like a bruise, the world moving on without him. Ariatia. The counter? A group of teachers laughed quietly, one glancing over her shoulder before turning away. The waitress returned, filling his cup. He reached for his wallet, pulling out a $20 bill. "Keep the change," he said, voice strained. She took the money, folding it into her apron. Later she would donate it to Amara's scholarship fund, a small act of quiet justice. Whitlock looked out the window, watching students walk by, their laughter muffled by the glass. He realized no one would join him. No one would ask his side. The isolation pressed in, heavier than the silence. In his old office, he finished his coffee, left a few coins on the table, and stood to leave. The waitress glanced up, her eyes meeting him for just a moment. There was no anger, just a tired kind of resolve. As Whitlock stepped into the sunlight, the diner door swung shut behind him. The world kept moving, and for the first time he understood what it meant to be left behind. Floodlights cast long shadows across the school wall as neighbors gathered, paint cans clinking and brushes ready. Amara stood at the center, her essay's words projected onto the bricks. A retired teacher dipped her brush in red, steady hands, tracing the phrase, "They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds." Children lined up, pressing their painted palms along the bottom, laughter ringing out in the night air. Lena painted beside Amara, her strokes sure and bold. A teacher from the school arrived, sleeves rolled, offering a box of fresh brushes. "Let's make it last," she said, voice low but determined. The mural grew with every hand, every color. Faces of black leaders emerged, their eyes watchful and kind. Amara's brother filmed, capturing the scene for those who couldn't be there. Music played from a portable speaker, hopeful and bright, weaving through the sound of bristles on brick. Across the street, Whitlock's house was dark, his silhouette barely visible behind drawn curtains. He watched, powerless as the wall transformed. The mural shone under the floodlights, a living testament to truth and resilience. As dawn crept in, the last strokes dried, the wall ablaze with memory and hope. Amara pressed her hand beside her father's story, sealing their legacy in color. The crowd stepped back, admiring their work. The mural was unignorable now, a promise that their voices would never be painted over again. Amara lingered, her heart full. The mural was more than art, it was a declaration, a refusal to be erased. The school wall, once blank and silent, now spoke for everyone who had ever been told to stay quiet. Floodlights cast long shadows across the school wall as neighbors gathered, paint cans clinking and brushes ready. Amara stood at the center, her essay's words projected onto the bricks. A retired teacher dipped her brush in red, steady hands, tracing the phrase, "They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds." Children lined up, pressing their painted palms along the bottom, laughter ringing out in the night air. Lena painted beside Amara, her strokes sure and bold. A teacher from the school arrived, sleeves rolled, offering a box of fresh brushes. "Let's make it last," she said, voice low but determined. The mural grew with every hand, every color. Faces of black leaders emerged, their eyes watchful and kind. Amara's brother filmed, capturing the scene for those who couldn't be there. Music played from a portable speaker, hopeful and bright, weaving through the sound of bristles on brick. Across the street, Whitlock's house was dark, his silhouette barely visible behind drawn curtains. He watched, powerless, as the wall transformed. The mural shone under the floodlights, a living testament to truth and resilience. As dawn crept in, the last strokes dried, the wall ablaze with memory and hope. Amara pressed her hand beside her father's story, sealing their legacy in color. The crowd stepped back, admiring their work. The mural was unignorable now, a promise that their voices would never be painted over again. Amara lingered, her heart full. The mural was more than art, it was a declaration, a refusal to be erased. The school wall, once blank and silent, now spoke for everyone who had ever been told to stay quiet. The hallway buzzed with quiet energy as students gathered around a new glass case mounted near the lockers. Inside, Amara's dad's 1992 detention, slip, defiant essay on MLK was displayed beside hers, the red ink faded but still legible. Notes began to appear, handwritten and folded. Suspended for braids. Failed for mentioning Tulsa. A white football player approached, hesitating before pinning up his own slip. Racial joke 1 week suspension. He scribbled, "I'm sorry," at the bottom, cheeks flushed. A teacher walked by, pausing to read each note, her eyes lingering on the growing collection. She left a sticky note. History is watching. Students added more slips throughout the day, the display case filling with stories, some angry, some hopeful, all real. The key to the case was tossed into a recycling bin, the door left permanently open for anyone to contribute. The glass reflected the faces of those who stopped to look, a living archive of resistance and regret. Amara stood nearby, watching as her classmates read and whispered. Some touched the glass, others just stared, the weight of shared experience settling over them. The hallway felt different, heavier, but also more honest. Her dad visited after school, standing quietly in front of the display. He placed a hand on the glass, pride and sadness mingling in his eyes. "You made sure they remember," he said softly. As the bell rang, students lingered by the case, reluctant to leave. The display was no longer just a collection of punishments. It was a testament to change, a promise that their stories would not be hidden again. A white family paused in front of the mural, their son reading aloud, "You suspended my history." The mother pulled out her phone, searching the school's name. Her gasp was sharp as headlines filled the screen. Protests, resignations, Amara's essay gone viral. The father frowned, glancing at the painted faces, uneasy. Amara watched from her classroom window, her reflection merging with Harriet Tubman's eyes on the wall. Inside, students gathered by the glass, whispering about the visitors outside. Ms. Rivera joined them, her voice low. "Seeds grow in cracked soil," she said, nodding toward the mural. The boy outside traced the painted letters with his finger, curiosity flickering across his face. "Why did they do that?" he asked. His mother hesitated, unsure how to explain. Group of students stepped outside, approaching the family. One girl offered, "It's all true. You can look it up." The father nodded, silent, as the family walked back to their car, still arguing softly. Inside, Amara felt a strange mix of pride and vulnerability. The mural had become a landmark, a lesson and a warning. Ms. Rivera placed a gentle hand on Amara's shoulder. "They'll remember this," she whispered. As the car drove away, the family's questions lingered in the air. The mural stood tall, its colors bold against the brick, refusing to let the past be forgotten. Amara turned from the window, ready for whatever came next, knowing the world was finally paying attention. The last bell rang, echoing through the halls as students spilled into the afternoon light. Amara walked past the mural, now bright with new chalk. "Add your story here," in looping rainbow letters. Her college acceptance letter peeked from her backpack, the word essay, A+, circled in blue at the top. Whitlock's replacement, A, black principal in a crisp navy suit, stood at the entrance, greeting students by name. He nodded at Amara, a silent acknowledgement of battles fought and won. She smiled, feeling the weight of old wounds lift, if only a little. Friends gathered by the mural, snapping photos and adding their own messages in colored chalk. "We're still here. Never erased?" The janitor wheeled his mop bucket nearby, pausing to admire the wall. The bucket's metal shone, reflecting the mural's bold reds and golds. Amara's grandmother appeared, her protest pin gleaming in the sun. She hugged Amara tight. "You made history, baby. Not just for you, for all of us." Amara blinked back tears, her voice soft. "We did it together." As students lingered, reluctant to leave, Amara pressed her palm to the mural, feeling the rough brick beneath her fingers. She turned, walking toward the exit, her steps light for the first time in months. Outside, the air buzzed with laughter and hope. The school felt changed. No longer a place of quiet erasure, but one where stories could finally be told. Amara's name would not be a footnote. It was a chapter, written in bold, for everyone to see. The janitor smiled, mop bucket gleaming, as the sun set on a school transformed by courage, truth, and the voices that refused to be quiet.